Oh, I'm gonna miss it. The glorious festival of rugby, powered by the sheer glee of watching Japan, the awe of seeing Samuel Adrada, the tears as Juan Manuel Gamanara told us he was so proud of his country, then effortlessly gave way to the highest intensity, most tactically astute tournament a purist could wish for, as some of the smartest coaches to ever be involved in the game, and Michael Cheika, threw everything at each other. And we scarcely could have asked for a better payoff, as England and South Africa met for a finale that combined both elements, tense, thrilling, and yet there was room enough for some glee, some awe, and some very deserved tears, the kind of things that typified the first half of this tournament. This was Japan 2019's final moment, and it was going out in style. And what a performance to see it out. South Africa were magnificent on Saturday. After being given no chance by most of the media, professional pundits, and the group of people I play touch with once a week, they hit Yokohama and instantly smashed their way through one country on their way to uniting their own. So, how did South Africa dismantle this English team and claim Bill for themselves? Let's start right at the beginning. Let's start further back than the beginning. Let's start even earlier. I said in my preview of the game that the coin toss before the match could actually decide this whole World Cup. This last year, a key part of England's game has been kicking off so as to force an awkward clearance, then taking the ball from the resulting line-out and smashing through a series of preordained, pre-arranged plays that were almost scripted by Eddie Jones. It's a multi-phase set move almost that they've designed to play off the first line-out of the game. These pacey, perfect plays have seen England score a try inside the first 10 minutes in 8 out of the last 10 games where they have kicked off. This has become crucial to Eddie Jones' England. This fast start sets a tone and they tend to stick to it. For every 38-point Scotland comeback, there have been 5 games like the All Blacks match last week, where this early try proves far too big a hump to ever overcome. In other words, if England win the toss and choose to kick off, they're at a huge advantage going into any game. Except something weird happened because England won the toss and then they chose to let South Africa kick off. It's possible this was just a pre-game brain fart by Farrell, who doesn't look especially sure as he makes the call, but considering how much of England's game is built on that early strike, I doubt it's an error. Which means there has to be an alternate explanation, and I've only got one theory. Eddie Jones is a slippery bugger. That's not a theory, that's just a fact. And he's been talking fairly openly for a year now about how he's saving tactics and secret plays back for a World Cup final, things he wouldn't even bring out in a quarter, semi, or game against Uruguay, the real world champions. And considering how few of them we really actually saw, I wonder whether this early strike tactic has been an 18-month bluff. This would be a very Eddie move. Rassie Erasmus will have prepped his team for the opening onslaught by England. They will have spent a fair chunk of their week's preparation focusing on how to stop it, knowing that this is utterly crucial having England play, and the most important factor in them winning is them stopping England scoring early. And then, when it comes to the game, it isn't happening. They aren't doing the thing that South Africa have been so focused on stopping them doing. Jones will have been preparing for a tight game, and so a try right after half-time would be enormous, tone-setting, potentially game-deciding no matter what the score is at that point. So it's possible Jones's plan was to spend 18 months of everyone thinking they're going to do this in the first play and then instead pull it right after half-time to decide the final. And true to form, England, from the half-time kickoff, send it right to Pollard, the entire team half-heartedly chasing, knowing he's going to thump it right back. Pollard does keep it in play, as per Wales' example in the only 2 times they didn't score off those opening 10, but there is a line-out for England less than a minute later. And from there, England do begin the process of sending a strike move. There's a clearly organised 2-phase plan, a crash ball, and then this move begins to play out, and I'd bet there would have been a 3rd and 4th beyond it. But after an initial carry, South Africa snuff out the first bit of invention through an aggressive press, getting in amongst attackers like sand into socks. And when the ball hits the ground, the Boks know how important quick ball is to England here, to this whole process. So Mark slows down the England ball as much as his namesake would say capitalism slows down our growth towards a truly free, equal, happy society. The defence is, by the time he's done, fully set, momentum is gone, and Daly has no option but to try and thump it, with emphasis on try, which is something that England didn't score during this game. However, this backfire is made even more brutal by the fact South Africa started so well themselves, and they were so aware in doing so of how much it was hurting England. Look at the sheer time Faf de Klerk takes over this ruck. Every second South Africa have the ball in the England half in these early stages is a moment's momentum loss for a team used to starting faster than Sonic the Hedgehog after he just ran into his ex. Courtney then forgets the laws, gives away a stupid penalty, and even though Pollard misses it, it pushes the clock out to 2 free minutes, and it doesn't stop from there. South Africa's control of this opening stanza was genuinely quite incredible. They just peppered the England 22 and stopped them ever starting. As I said earlier, more often than not, in these last 18 months, England have crossed the opposition try line inside the first 10 minutes. On Saturday, England didn't cross the halfway line in the first 10 minutes. That's not even an exaggeration. This was England's first phase inside the South African half. 10 minutes and 12 seconds on the clock. And this was the first phase from either team in Bok territory. 9.5 minutes played. England then knew once they got into this half, they had to make it count. They had to make the most of their first excursion upfield. So they set up to attack the left even before Marks is on. Just 3 Springboks are covering the short side. So Elliot Daly comes round late, having hidden himself on the open side. Laws, Itoje run decent lines to fix the 2 forwards. However, Faf de Klerk shoots up brilliantly to hit either Daly or Watson and just closes down the space magnificently. He makes the pass incredibly difficult to Fred. So Youngs knows he needs to do something fresh, original, new, innovative. He needs to do something that nobody in South Africa will ever see coming. And he does just that. He lobs the ball pointlessly over everyone's head and into touch. This was just the start of a game Youngs will want to have endless sunshine out of his mind, the kind of performance that will make him wish he never achieved what is the pinnacle of his career, as he spent it throwing horrible passes like this. It totally takes all the momentum out of the attack before it can even be generated and leaves forward with no option but to hoof it, leading to a kick that he overcooks and puts out on the full. But I think the most important moment for Youngs came just a few minutes after his absolute moon howler of a pass, which incidentally is a phrase I just made up, but to throw a pass this bad in the World Cup final is so disastrous it deserves a new category of shitness all to itself. This time it's off a pretty good kick by Ford, which gives England a pretty big net gain. South Africa have the best line out in the competition, however, only losing 1 of their own throws over 7 games over the entire tournament. And here, they just disrupt the England ball a little bit and force a knock on. It's not a disaster, they're still upfield, but look at Youngs. He has that look that I get when I'm trying to do DIY. It's absolute frustration. This is pointless, this isn't happening, I want to give up, I want to go and do something else, I want to sit in a corner, maybe cry, maybe have a lie down, maybe build some Lego, maybe watch the film Cranks. I want to be doing literally any. His body language remains petulant and fed up for pretty much the rest of the half from here on out. Ben Youngs, one of his team's main decision makers and the man that everything goes through, has lost his cool and as good as resigned himself to the fact they've lost 15 minutes in at just 3-0 down. Eddie Jones is normally a guy unafraid of making early substitutions, but here he didn't have the option, as he took a huge gamble a few months earlier and it backfired on him. Knowing he was only going to take 2 scrum halves to the World Cup, he dropped everyone else early, after giving all of the contenders virtually no game time. Meaning, when Willie Hines got injured the week before the World Cup final, he had to call up a 9 to sit on the bench who had played about 20 minutes of international rugby over his whole career, and hadn't even been in the training squad to learn the calls and get to know the players and get to know what they were doing since the first week of June. But Youngs wasn't the only one throwing shockers. Owen Farrell has developed a particular kind of pass this last year. Flat, brutal, on the money, just brilliant. I've come to refer to it as the Farrell pass. He tries one here. It's about half an inch too ambitious in the middle of an idea that's already 50 yards too ambitious, and it's a bounce away from genuinely being the most notoriously awful pass in the history of international rugby. Now, Farrell's had a brilliant tournament and an absolutely fantastic year, and just seeing him execute like this is really out of character. And then there's this from Billy Vunipola, another man who's had an excellent year apart from the bit where he defends Israel Folau. England are trying to run what is a quite simple but a very smart exit play. They send Tuolangi and Vunipola right up in the face of the South African on-rushing defence, meaning they focus on trying to tackle England's 2 biggest carriers, and the ball instead goes out the back to either Ford or Farrell. Except Big Billy does exactly that. He passes to either Ford or Farrell, rather than passing to Ford or passing to Farrell. He just kind of chucks it at the floor between them. Farrell finds himself forced to take it in, he gets isolated, penalty conceded. South Africa take a 3-point lead early in the game. It's just a case of execution. Individual errors can happen to anyone at any point, but there was something off about England that we can never truly understand as mere observers. It might have been nervousness, tiredness, frustration, some combination of all the 3. It could be that they're all still fuming about their bus being late. I mean, they are British, so we'll never know what it was. But there was something very off about the England execution, just the tiny little 1% of how things got done. And they weren't helped by how on song so many of the South African team were. I think this was perhaps the best game Handré Pollard has played in 5 years. Even when he plays well, Pollard tends to have a moment or two of forgetting he isn't a forward. No other 10 in World Rugby is as fond of the crash ball as him. The warm, comforting feeling of other human bodies pressed against him, trying to murder him. Handré Pollard is a big physical lad, and sometimes he lets that get in the way of his actual talent, but on Saturday he wrapped those two components up into an irresistible package. His kicking was excellent. Off the tee, he was incredibly accurate, and even though he scuffed this super ambitious shot, I love that he went for it. He has the insane confidence to try and smash it from this far out in a World Cup final. He put up more bombs than the Bush administration, but they were smart enough and accurate enough to avoid any further comparisons there. His chase on this early hoist was particularly impressive. It's just another example of him just taking his chances. He looks at how the England backfield is set up, he sees a bit of space, and his straight line allows him to get into a better shape under the high ball than Ford, who's covering across from a diagonal angle. And then we get into him with the ball in hand. As I just mentioned, Pollard is a big boy and not afraid of contact. Sam Underhill, meanwhile, is clearly sick of sushi and really at this point just wants a bite of his favourite food, opposition fly halves. So he does as he has a license to and has the no tournament and flies in to eat Pollard. This is the juiciest meal he's been faced with all trips to Japan, and he's very hungry. Except, this is the play. Pollard has made himself bait, deliberately lingering in front of Underhill until he starts salivating, long enough just to catch his attention before dropping the pass off to Mbonambi. Pollard knowing he can ride even the hardest of hits. Underhill has a nibble, but he lets a man get through. Bongi then boings it on to Vermeulen, who takes it in. Then South Africa set up a fairly standard pod of forwards, with Khaleesi and Mapimpi out wide to stretch the defence. Except, look at the personnel in this pod. Lou Diego takes the ball, but his main support line, the latch if you will, the second man in the shape, is Handré goddamn Pollard. He begins the loop, and crucially, Diego waits until Vunipola is fully committed before giving the pass. This puts Pollard against Dan Cole, a man slower than the inanimate object he's named after. It was as complete a performance as I've ever seen from Pollard, and he wasn't the only South African to stand out. Faf de Klerk was typically excellent. Defensively, he was brilliant. This tackle was fantastic, but the way he just shoots in here from the sweeper position to put the attack off is so disruptive to England. They can't get anything going. Just as they seem to have found space, they seem to have sorted their attack out. In comes Reese Witherspoon's unflattering stunt double to put them off. And then we have his kicking and game management. For all the criticism of how often he kicks, he just makes sure South Africa are always moving forward. If things are on, he's happy to throw a mad pass like this, but if he sees nothing in a horizontal scan, it's just a case of moving South Africa down into the next zone of the field. It's brilliant, and between the zone of control and the defence, both of which de Klerk is a big part of, it never feels like South Africa aren't in the game. You can feel their presence at all times, unlike the All Blacks last week who seemed to disappear for passages when England let them get on top. Even when Farrell and co are in possession, you can always feel a South African presence in the same way I do every time I look at my DVDs and realise I own a copy of the 2015 film Chappie directed by Neil Blomkamp. But I can't go much further without talking about the man who just a day later was named the new World Player of the Year, Pieter-Steph du Toit. The only time Pieter-Steph du Toit doesn't look like he's about to cry is when he's actually crying, but he has to get rid of that excess water somehow, because this man does not seem to sweat. Like the condition his acronym is so close to, PSDT does not tire and he never goes away. He plays every minute of every game like he's emptying the tank in the last 5 of the game of his life. And knowing he has an evergreen and gold weapon like this, Erasmus has this last year recalibrated how he uses his flankers defensively. Du Toit's job is extremely similar to how Wales use their scrum half, a role I talked about earlier in the tournament where I coined the term the missile. He's like a bonus defender. Not part of the main alignment, his job is to spot something, to shoot up at high speed and disrupt the attack. He doesn't have a standard position or shape. With the amount of analysis every team does these days, each attack will know how most teams are going to defend. But with Pieter-Steph du Toit in the opposition team, you have a rogue element. Something hard-hitting and impossible to predict. Something that doesn't follow the normal pattern, that flies up constantly to just smash you out back behind the gain line where you belong. But it's even worse actually when you can predict him. As likely their fastest forward, the Springboks love to sit him opposite an opposition 10 and just let him rip shit up. It's no secret that George Ford is brilliant when he's on the front foot, but it's far harder to get anything going no matter who you are when there's a 9-foot, 20-stone weeping action man in your face. This was England's first real attack of the game, and Pieter-Steph du Toit, the sobbing shithouse himself, marks George Ford 5 phases in a row. He just stands, he waits, he smashes him regardless of whether he's already passed the ball, then he moves right on, waits, and does it again. This was just a case of getting into Ford's head, of just making him know no matter where you go, I'll be here. I'll be here waiting. And then afterwards, I'll go to the World Rugby Awards tomorrow and claim my Player of the Year trophy. On the surface here, England have an overlap, except they kind of hadn't. It's actually shut down pretty completely by and then Kolbe doing the Razzie wing thing and killing it. The South African defence seems to lead to overlaps. It looks like them do, but most of them are actually kind of optical illusion courtesy of Erasmus Industries. Here, England bought a sharp late at the back to create seemingly a 5-on-2. This should be a clean break, but the aggression of Mapimpi takes a second out of the attack, and even though Curry does brilliantly, by this point, the rest of the defence have drifted across. This leads to Jamie George, who for all his talent is still a front row forward, throwing a pass so poorly aimed you'd think he's England's starting scrum half. The moment any Springbok defender has done the job of applying pressure on the line, they drift a bit towards the wing to help Mapimpi or Kolbe out. The two wingers' jobs are basically to take momentum out of the attack, to stop the attack rather than the attacker. Sometimes that just takes the form of slowing it. Even if they don't take the man to ground, they're still stopping them. They're nominally the team's worst tacklers, though it's very harsh to say considering some of the tackles Kolbe put in at the weekend. So their job isn't necessarily about getting the man to ground, but just preventing things getting any wider, things developing. The only way round the Springbok defence is to make the winger think rather than to engage them right away, because that's what they want to do, and that's what Erasmus wants you to try and do. England tried to play the traditional way and fix them, make them commit, then pass it out. These plays are perfectly intelligent when it comes to fixing most of the team, and they work well and would work against most defences, but they don't sort out the one key thing and how to beat the way the Boks defend. You get the impression most of Eddie Jones' research went into the All Blacks, and he wasn't designing set plays to sort out the Springboks in quite the way both Gatlin and Hansen have early in the tournament. And yet England still did manufacture a handful of genuine opportunities. This one, there's no illusion here, this is just an outright chance. The South African defence means Kolbe is always going to shoot in on Courtney Lawes here. Ford knows this, so he gives it in order to bait the mini maestro, expecting Lawes to use the kind of soft hands he must have developed from using those men's skincare products he'd been advertising every single ad break this World Cup. Except the Lawes passing is so slow you'd think it had to go through the House of Lords. Before he can even process what he's going to do, he's bracing for contact and he's going to ground. It's a phenomenal tackle by Cheslin Kolbe, and England win the penalty, but that's only because Kolbe is daft enough to enter the ruck. This is chance gone. Yes, they kick 3 points, but it should have been 7. England were trying to play to their strengths, using a power game to start up a fast game, but South Africa just disrupted them both. England made the second least metres of any team in Rugby World Cup history, not 2019 World Cup, in any World Cup since 87. Forced to play without the ball and then met behind the gain line every time they did grab it, it was very difficult for them to start anything. You can instantly see the difference here in perhaps England's most actually threatening attack. For the first time, they work Vunipola and Tuolangi into gaps to make some big carries and get themselves going forward. And then, freeze frame here, and it looks like an overlap, it looks like a chance. But the pace of the defence is what's important. One man gets in Ford's way and the other in his eye line, cutting their options down dramatically and protecting the Springbok try line. This controlled aggression on defence is a huge strength of South Africa themselves, but it doesn't get any more playing to your strengths than the moment I'm about to show you. And I'm slightly obsessed with this, so I'm very excited, because when you think of the 2019 World Champion Springbok team, you should think of this. In the way this try summed up everything about England in the semi, this try told us who Wales were in the quarters, this interview told us everything about Uruguay, and this moment was all we need to know about Canada. It was these 3 points that best describes Rassie Erasmus' run with South Africa. It's a team that intimately knows its own strengths and has worked out innovative new ways to use them. So let's begin with how we got here, because it's actually a really interesting passage to play. Tom Curry wins a brilliant turnover, and this kick then should put England back in the game. Except Farrell misses it. This is a huge turning point, made all the bigger by the fact South Africa then recover their own dropout. Now, the dropout is a really weird facet of the game, because there's no other circumstances ever under which your defence will be set up like it is here. And hence, losing one is actually really hard to recover, especially when you have Etzebeth and Dialande doing as well as this. A fantastic, pretty phenomenal offload, and then excellent work to stay in. This leaves England scrambling, with a lot of space in behind. Watson shoots up, buying an overlap, and Lua exploits this. Daly has no time or angle. It's a pretty average clearance, meaning South Africa have made a major net gain and wrestled momentum out of England's hands. Any score for South Africa here, especially off the back of where this has come, a penalty, a drop goal, anything, is huge, and even with over 20 minutes to go, could decide the game. So, Marks throws to the front of the line out and they fire it back to Faf. Note there's no jump. Energy is conserved, the ball is played quickly, and as I said, they have the best line in the competition, so this surprises England. This catches them off guard. They're expecting them to use that best line out in the competition. It goes straight to Dialande, which is far less of a surprise. And this is where Handré Pollard's ability to mix it in almost as an extra forward comes in handy. Only backs enter this breakdown. with Pollard as the main latch. This move would work with almost no other 10 in World Rugby. 4 forwards attempted him by the chance to ruck against the smaller lads, but Pollard and hold them out, whilst Mapimpi tends to be helping as well. And then, just as de Klerk reaches the breakdown, a feeling of sheer fear spreads across the English defence, because Maro Itoje has seen what's coming next, the storm that's brewing just out of shot. Dwayne Vermeulen is the main carrier, positioned at the front. Dan Cole makes contact with him, and instantly the rest of the South African pack, and I mean the entire pack, snap on. They're aligned very carefully, prop on either side, heavy, hard support, lending an instant amount of weight. Du Toit is at the back, a nippy guy in case they need a breakaway. The moment a second man from either team joins, it becomes a maul, and South Africa smuggle the ball back right away, meaning it's now illegal for Cole to complete the tackle and bring Vermeulen to ground. But if he doesn't collapse it, there's a fair chance this pack could drive him right back over his own line. Cole basically has no choice but to concede the penalty, but to give South Africa 3 points, because it's immensely kickable. This takes South Africa out to a 9-point lead, meaning realistically, England are now going to have to score a try, something the Springboks have only conceded 4 times in 7 games at this World Cup. This move felt brand new. Mid-match mauls happen. Italy tried them quite feverishly early in Conor O'Shea's tenure, but they remain rare because they're a major turnover risk. Instead, South Africa basically set up a scrum midfield, targeting a player who couldn't stop their pack's power even when he had 7 men in support. Through timing and intelligence, South Africa basically found a way to legalise the flying wedge. This move good as guaranteed 3 points for Pollard and a hefty erection for Rassie Erasmus. But where did this move come from? So, in this year's Super Rugby season, the Bulls ran what is now a very familiar move right near the try line. This line out is solely comprised of backs. The Bulls throw it into the front, the scrum half ships it on to the entire bloody pack, waiting just yards away. They drive this over the line in a move that is almost identical, but Rassie Erasmus tweaked it a tad. If you put only backs into a line-out in the World Cup final, you're getting turned over. This level, the scrutiny is way too hard for such obvious trickery. It only works if the opposition aren't expecting to be schooled, and in this case, it was fairly obvious they were trying something tricky. Yes, the Bulls version is more fun, but it's less practical when it comes to actually winning the ball in the first place. So, having seen some of the same players do it recently, there are 3 possible explanations. One, maybe it's a coincidence, which is kind of actually quite likely, but no fun, so let's toss that out. Number 2, he stole this move from the Bulls. It was invented by the coaching team. He was watching this derby, saw it happen, heart eyes instantly flashed from his glasses, or one of the players from the Bulls team suggested they migrate it across because it'll work with the Springboks, and it very much does. Or, number 3, and this is a completely ridiculous theory, but I quite like giving the coach who just won the World Cup a bit too much credit, so bear with me, and that's that this move was invented by Rassie Erasmus, or Springbok forward coach Matt Proudfoot, and they deliberately fed it down into Super Rugby to try, just to attempt. As Erasmus is South African Rugby's overall director of rugby, this is possible. And if he wanted to trial this, but keep it as a prize for a big moment, like maybe a World Cup final, running in Super Rugby is safest. Still a high enough level that the trial is valid, but if they tried it in a test, all opposition coaches would be ready for it. Stopping it will be a different matter, but if you're well prepared and you know it's coming, any maul is manageable. So if we just go with this for a second, it begs another question. Where did Erasmus get the idea? And this is where my theory gets even more insane. Before being hired by the Springboks, Rassie Erasmus was in charge of the old Irish War Dogs Munster. And the wonderful thing about Munster as a rugby club is that they, more than any other team in Europe, perhaps the world, are all about mythology, about telling old tales of historic games on cloudy nights. And one particular game still lives long in folklore. The Miracle Match. In order to qualify for the quarterfinals, Munster had to beat the top team in England, which bizarrely at the time was Gloucester, by 27 points and score 4 tries. And in the 81st minute, Ronan O'Gara slotted this conversion of Munster's 4th try to make the margin precisely 27 points. The highlights of this game are baked into Munster rugby, and they probably made Erasmus watch it during his job interview. There's absolutely no way he avoided it during his tenure. But importantly, along the way, Munster do this. One man carries into contact, and then, in a pre-arranged move, the entire pack flood in, forming an 8-man maul in the middle of the pitch. This is a completely ridiculous theory, but I choose to believe it was this maul during Munster's iconic Miracle Match that gave Rassie Erasmus the idea for the play which took them out beyond England's reach in the 2019 Rugby World Cup final. Those heart eyes shot out of Rassie's head in that interview, and he knew this would be perfect for the Springboks if he ever got the chance. And this means, most importantly, According to my madcap theory, which I'm just going to say is definitely true, Munster just beat England in the final and won the Rugby World Cup. South Africa are in control of the set piece from the first scrum. It was absolute dominance and gave them such a platform for points. I've talked before about how South Africa's strategy is to always keep going forward and therefore always keep themselves within kicking range. Having a weapon like the scrum is enormous when playing such a zone-led strategy, as is having a boot like Andre Pollard's. All they had to do was force one knock-on, and they were giving themselves a pretty good chance at handing Andre a shot, which was giving themselves a pretty good shot at 3 points. And their dominance is made all the more remarkable when you consider their pack was the lighter of the two. This is largely thanks to conditioning coach Aled Walters, who joined Scarlet's legend Herschel Yankees as the second West Walian to win this World Cup, having spent the entire lead-up just stripping this side of excess weight until they were completely lean without sacrificing any power. This maul was a boiling over of everything the Springboks have spent 18 months building towards. All the backroom staff, all the players, even the ones not on the pitch, not even in the wider squad. Pulling this in a game where they had such dominance added to the fear factor. You can almost see an "oh shit" look set in on Itoje's face when he sees it's coming his way. The fact Erasmus had this ready but kept it in his pocket until the final is something you can't help admire. I certainly can't. Especially because these 3 points could well have decided the game were it not for the fact that the game then got even more decided when, in the 65th minute, Makazole Mapimpi became the first South African to ever score a try in a Rugby World Cup final as he sealed their 3rd title. The initial build-up comes via some nice work from South Africa. Using a 2-man structure I discussed in my video on the box way back before the Rugby Championship, this essentially means every player is paired with someone to complement them, and in this case, it's almost exclusively forwards with another forward to clear them out, using the usually enormous second man to make the ball playable quickly and cleanly, generating ball enough to let Faf de Klerk decide when he wants to use it, to bring the tempo up and down like the 90s pop star which's haircut is so reminiscent. Villiers Leroux then tries this speculative little chip. Daly covers it, and England eventually go do a big kick of the egg thing. Now, the common wisdom is that counter-attack is just straight from the kick, but despite there being a phase in this try, this is very much a product of kick return. Without any chance to set properly, Anthony Watson steps into the guard simply because he's quick, and therefore was the second man chasing the kick up. Except he has no idea what he's doing here, he doesn't put any pressure on, and this leaves Joe Marler, of all people, covering the wing. South Africa, of course, have no problem getting around him and a knackered Dan Cole, and once it's out to Mapimpi, all he has to do is put in a little chip, and should be in for a simple try when he regathers. But his centre turns a 95% score for himself that would seal a World Cup win into a 100% try for his team. I genuinely think this might be the most unselfish piece of play in rugby union history, and it gives South Africa the game, it gives them the tournament. And so, to say thank you, what does Mapimpi do? Well, he just completely blanks them, of course. Whilst it's easy to rip into England, especially in this final third, in response to that try, they actually do exactly the right thing. And it's exactly what the All Blacks didn't do all game against them after conceding that early try to Tuolangi. They just play simple rugby and they stick to their system. They slowly break South Africa down systematically rather than trying to do too much too soon. 13 points is a huge lead in the final, but they're in the Springboks half. And one try turn things, it puts them back in the hunt for a little bit of off-brand deer meat. So they stay calm, and when they do chuck it wide, it's fairly standard. It's accurate passes that they throw into any circumstances that make sense. There's no panic, and that's worth enormous credit. And they do get pretty close, only for a knock-on here and a turnover here to cost them a chance for what would have been a remarkable comeback. This is all, of course, before Francois Steyn clears the ball with what he would probably call a delicate little dink. And even after being pushed back here into the own half, England continued to stick to that system and continued to just work systematically, slowly. But then Malcolm Mark steps in and is like, hey, I think possession should be distributed more evenly between all parties. And he makes a great tackle to dislodge the ball. And Peter Toy then makes what is always the right option, and he passes it to Cheslin Kolbe. Now, this has been a brilliant World Cup, lit up by so many moments of individual brilliance. And so, it couldn't be more fitting than for the final to be decided to end on the very best of them all. The moment the toy fixes Daly, I couldn't help but begin to wonder, to dream that maybe he could. But logic, having watched rugby in such detail for so many years, tells you he couldn't possibly. No one scores in this position. And then you remember, he's Cheslin Kolbe, and he's about to score the best individual try of the year in the biggest game of his life. I'm not a Springboks fan, but seeing Kolbe do this had me screaming like crazy and my eyes watering like Peter Steph Toy watching the end of It's a Wonderful Life. A large part of South Africa's success in these knockout games was the fact that if their bench stood on top of each other's shoulders, they'd be bigger than the Burj Khalifa and would weigh approximately the same. So to see this from a man approximately the size of a salad is beautiful. Siya Kolisi's inspirational story proved that rugby is a game for people of all creeds and all colours. And this try showed it's just as open to all shapes and all sizes, because it's been that kind of World Cup. Say what you like about Mara Itoje rejecting his medal, but this England team's drive and their passages of perfection along the way will have inspired a new generation of rugby fans from across counties, just as this whole tournament has inspired so many people across the world. An estimated 1.8 million people in Asia alone have taken up rugby as a result of this World Cup. And can you blame them? Because if Japan can go from one win in 28 years to 4 from 4 in order to reach the knockouts, if a team of semi-professionals can defeat the superstars in Fiji in one of the best games of the year, and if this skinny kid from the townships, who played rugby in boxers because he couldn't afford shorts, can go on to lift the Webb Ellis Cup as captain of his country, then any of us could. This has been a Rugby World Cup to cherish, and my God, am I going to miss it. And so that brings to a close my half-hour dissection of the 2019 Rugby World Cup final between South Africa and England. That was basically a full week's worth of work. That was me being up till 2 in the morning, as it currently is now, pretty much about 1:30 in the morning, every day and night, trying to break down the game into as much detail as possible, writing it, editing it. It's been a massive undertaking, as it has been over the last couple of months. For those of you that aren't aware, because I am finally, hopefully you're seeing this back on YouTube, I've been through, my aim was to get through every game in the World Cup. I'm almost there. I have 11 games left to go after that. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to do a breakdown, a run through, a roundup of the pool games I have left. 7 out of those 8 I'm going to cover in a roundup in the next few days. I then have 2 of the quarterfinals left I didn't manage to get to. I'll cover those 2 together as well. And then the final game I have to get to will be Japan v Scotland. So I'm hoping to get through all of that as quickly as possible. I'm also going to begin uploading the videos I've made that you may not have seen. Some of you may have missed if you're only following this on YouTube. I've been making them uploading to Vimeo and to a website I made, squidgeproductions.co.uk. I'll be posting those, uploading this to YouTube, assuming this one doesn't get taken down after a few days. So I'm going to monitor the situation, see how it goes. It seems to be reasonably safe to post stuff again on YouTube, but we'll see. And we'll see how this goes. Hopefully you may have joined me during the premiere I've done. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Let me know as well. Let me know in the comments. You can do that right now. As I say, the Rugby World Cup is now over for 2019. I don't quite know what to do with myself, but I am looking forward to a lie down once I've got through these final few videos and rounded up the last few games. And then beyond that, thank you very much for watching this. I particularly want to say thank you to the Patreon people. It's been, I can't begin to express how appreciated it is. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to continue having lost all ad revenue, having lost all of that. You guys were the sole reason I was able to continue to walk around Japan. I was able to actually get back. The reason I've been able to buy food to keep myself sustained is I've been pulling these ridiculous all nights to try and make videos like this. So thank you enormously to every single one of you. I can't appreciate it enough to say thank you, I guess. I've recorded a few of the bits I didn't put out. I didn't get time just through trying to edit all of the actual videos on games. So I've got a few bits I recorded in Japan I'll put up. And I've been keeping a loose video diary, so I lose my mind from the process of recording the audio and beginning to edit the actual footage onwards. So there's a few days of just me at random intervals throughout the entire day. I just record little video diaries. I put that up for Patreons only, and I'll be doing more bits like that going forward. So thank you very much for watching that. I am rambling a bit now, but as I say, it's almost 2 in the morning. And I've just finished that. So there'll be more for the Rugby World Cup coming up very soon on the channel. But thank you for watching that. That was all intents and purposes my opus on the Rugby World Cup final. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you again very soon.